My name is Sarah Mitchell. I am 35 years old, and I work as a pediatric nurse, which means I knew exactly what was wrong with my baby boy about 10 seconds before I allowed myself to accept it. Last night at 11 in the evening, my little sister is standing on my front porch screaming my name into the doorbell camera, begging me not to do what I was about to do. 10 months before that moment, she walked into a family dinner holding a glass of red wine. 5 weeks after she broke the only rule I ever gave her and put my 7-month-old son in the intensive care unit. When I asked her why she refused to stop, she looked me straight in the eyes and said, "He is still alive, isn't he?" But here is the part none of them understood while standing in that hospital hallway back in September. What happened to my baby was not even the worst thing my family would do that year. What my own mother did 3 months later inside a courtroom is still the part that makes my hand shake when I try to say it out loud. Welcome back to the channel where family secrets finally come into the light and quiet women stop being quiet. If stories about betrayal, boundaries, and the hardest choices a mother can make speak to something in you, then you are exactly where you need to be. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And please subscribe because this story is far from over. Let me start from the beginning because the ending only lands if you know what I was protecting. I live in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where the local diner still closes for high school football games, and everyone knows your last name before they learn your first. I have worked the pediatric floor at the hospital here for 11 years now. I put myself through nursing school on overnight shifts and instant noodles, and I married a man named Kyle, a power line technician with rough hands and the patience of a rock. He travels for work when storms hit and the grid goes down. We have 2 children. Lily was 6 years old that fall, all missing teeth and very strong opinions about everything. And then there was Caleb, our surprise baby, who arrived in March after we had given away every onesie and promised each other we were finished. 7 months old that September, round little wrists, a laugh that made Kyle drop whatever he was holding every single time. People make jokes about the way I run my house. Labels on every jar. A laminated card on the refrigerator with medication dosing weights for children. A checklist in the diaper bag that gets updated every month. At work they call it charting. And charting is the habit that keeps small people alive because if something is not written down, then for all practical purposes it did not happen. Kyle says I document our home life like a government inspector might show up on a Tuesday. He is not wrong. But people always ask me why I am this way. Why I check locks twice and read labels carefully and count everything. They assume it is because of nursing. It is not. Nursing just gave my caution a name badge and a steady paycheck. The real reason goes further back than any of that. It lives in the house I grew up in, 2 towns east of here, where the family rule was that nothing bad ever happened, no matter how many times it did. My father was a good man on paper. He worked a warehouse job for decades. And every single evening, he earned what my mother called his reward, a glass by his chair. Then 2 glasses. Then the bottle sitting in the front seat of his truck like a permanent passenger. Nobody in our house used the word drunk. Dad was tired. Dad had a long week. It was always a long week. My mother, Carol, kept the story clean like it was a second job. She would water down his liquor when she thought he was not watching. She pressed his shirts for church every Sunday morning. If a neighbor saw him stumble on the porch steps, she would laugh and blame the loose board. Then she would go out and fix the board herself. That is the piece people miss about families like mine. The lying is never lazy. It is devoted. It is full-time labor performed with love by people who would rather shave the truth down every single day than say one honest sentence out loud. What happens in this house stays in this house. I could put that on a needlework pillow and sell it at a fair. When I was 19, my father's liver gave out. The obituary said it was heart-related. Every single person at the funeral nodded, and agreed it was heart-related in the same tone you would use to say the weather was mild. I stood beside the casket knowing the truth and saying the weather was mild. In my family, forgiveness has always been a faster word for forgetting. I learned that before I ever learned to drive. The detail that matters for everything that comes after is this. My sister Bethany was 17 the year our father died. Between the two of us, I am the one who left. I went to school. I built something of my own. Bethany is the one who never really got out, not in any way that counts. I want to be fair to my sister because she is not a monster, and this story does not work if you believe she is. Bethany Sober is the best company you will find anywhere. She does character voices when she reads to kids. She remembers how you take your coffee from one visit to the next. When Lily was small, Bethany was the fun aunt in every true sense of that word. Glitter and puddle jumping and letting a 4-year-old put makeup on her for an hour. But Bethany drinks the way our father drank. And for 10 years, I watched it slowly climb. The bartending job she loved disappeared after she was caught drinking on shift. The driving under the influence charge 2 years before Caleb was born, when I quietly paid over $2,000 for her lawyer and told Kyle it was a loan, knowing full well it was not. The apartment deposits that went missing. The Sunday phone calls that started warm and turned sour by the second drink. And every single time, my mother had a translation ready. She is spirited. She is grieving. She just needs her family to believe in her. The last real limit had a date attached to it. Lily's 5th birthday, about a year and a half before Caleb came along. Bethany arrived 2 hours late, glassy-eyed and too loud, caught her foot on a folding chair, and brought the entire cake table down with her. Frosting on the fence posts. Lily crying into my shoulder, asking me in a small, confused voice why Aunt Bethany was walking so funny. That night I drove to Bethany's apartment, sat across from her at her own kitchen counter, and gave her the only condition I had left. You do not drink around my children. That is the whole rule. One thing. I was not asking her to get sober. I was not asking her to apologize again. One rule, and she could stay in our lives. She agreed before I even finished the sentence. I have been a nurse long enough to know what that means. People agree fastest to the conditions they have no intention of keeping. For a while the rule held, and then something better than the rule arrived. Something that felt like hope. The spring after Caleb was born, Bethany got sober. Not brochure sober. Real sober. She found a Tuesday evening group in a church basement 2 towns over, and she actually showed up. Her skin cleared. Her text messages came at reasonable hours and made sense. She drove to the hospital to meet Caleb with gas station flowers and shaking hands, and she held him like he was made of something fragile and precious. She apologized to Lily the right way, no long speech, just a Saturday morning of baking together, letting Lily crack every single egg. I stood in my own kitchen watching them laugh with flour on their faces, and I wanted so badly to believe in it. My mother was glowing. See, she kept saying, all that girl ever needed was for her family to have faith in her. 5 months. That is what Bethany had built by that September. 5 months of sobriety, and the whole family counted each one out loud like something sacred. I counted too. I also quietly kept counting other things, the way you count breaths on a sleeping patient without waking anyone up. Where her eyes traveled at the cookout when Kyle opened the cooler. How she slipped out early on a difficult anniversary. I hated myself a little for keeping the tally. The sister with the mental clipboard, auditing a miracle. But 11 years on a pediatric floor teaches you something about hope. It is a vital sign. You chart it, and then you keep watching the monitor. Then September came, and the daycare called at 6 in the morning. A chickenpox outbreak, 2 confirmed cases, the entire infant room closed for 2 weeks. And life, which has a dark sense of humor, chose exactly those 2 weeks to test me. Our pediatric unit was already short 3 nurses that month. 1 on maternity leave, 1 out with a back injury, 1 recruited away by a travel agency for double pay. I had a 2-year-old patient recovering from a respiratory illness whose mother slept in the chair beside him every night. My charge nurse was pleading with people not to call out. Kyle was on a mandatory rotation several states away, gone for days at a stretch following storm damage across the grid. There was no neighbor with infant experience available on short notice. No drop-in daycare that takes a 7-month-old with 2 days of warning. I said no to Bethany watching Caleb before anyone even suggested it out loud. I said it twice. Once to Kyle over the phone, and once at my mother's kitchen table with Bethany sitting right there, close enough to see it land on her face like something physical, something she decided to absorb gracefully. Then my mother made her offer. And it was a genuinely good offer. That is the part one needs you to understand. She said, "I will be there every single minute. Bethany just helps with bottles and laundry. You are not leaving him with her. You are leaving him with me." 61 years old. Raised 2 children without incident. Whatever else she got wrong over the years, my mother always showed up when it counted. So I agreed with conditions. And I read those conditions out loud in front of everyone the way you read orders back to a physician. Mom does not leave the house. Bethany is never alone with him. Any problem at all, any concern, you call me and I walk off my shift. Everyone nodded. My mother held my hand. Bethany said softly, "Thank you for trusting me." Those conditions held for exactly 4 days. Day 5 was a Thursday. Caleb was cutting his first tooth, which meant no one in the house had slept properly. He had been up most of the night, red-cheeked and furious at his own gums, and I had walked him in figure eights down the hallway until my vision blurred. Before my shift, I laid everything out on the counter like a medication cart. The infant pain reliever with the dose written in pen and circled for his exact weight. The teething ring from the freezer. A printed note because my handwriting is a nurse's handwriting and I did not trust it under stress. No honey. No blankets in the crib. Call me first, then the pediatrician number taped underneath. My mother kissed my cheek and reminded me she had raised 2 babies through teething. Thank you very much. Bethany looked tired but clear, and she held the printed note with both hands, reading it carefully. Or performing reading it carefully. I no longer know which. My shift was the kind where sitting down is not an option. Around 1 in the afternoon, I received a text from my mother, running to the pharmacy for my blood pressure prescription. 20 minutes. Bethany is rocking him. Everything is fine. I stood in the medication room with my thumb over the screen and felt the old alarm go off in a place I had spent years training myself to ignore. And I answered it like a professional. I called her. No answer. She was driving. I texted back. Please go home. The agreement was every minute. I watched the typing dots appear and disappear. A pump started alarming down the hallway. 20 minutes became 40 the way they always do. At nearly 2 in the afternoon, my mother's next message arrived, and it was not a reply. It said, "Come home right now." I do not remember much of the drive except that I made it in 18 minutes, and I was already talking to dispatch in my head before I reached my own street. I came through my front door like emergency personnel. My mother was in the living room with both hands pressed over her mouth. Bethany stood near the portable crib we kept downstairs, swaying slightly, saying Caleb's name in a high-singing voice. And my son was lying there wrong. Every parent knows how their baby sleeps. I have known 500 babies sleep. Caleb was gray, pale the way shadows are pale, limp, skin cool and damp. When I put my hand on his chest, his breathing was shallow and far too slow. When I lifted one eyelid, his eyes were rolling. I leaned in, and the smell hit me, sweet and sharp underneath everything else, unmistakable to a girl raised in the house I was raised in. What I said to the police, to the doctors, to the lawyers, and to a judge, I will say here plainly. The bottle was still on the side table. I lifted it to my nose. There was alcohol in the formula. And Bethany's voice ran down my spine like cold water when she said he would not stop crying. She said it like an explanation, like a reasonable thing. "It is just a drop on the gums," she said. "Grandma used to do it for us." He finally relaxed. There was a glass on the counter also, mostly empty. Not the first one. I know how to read a room. I grew up in one exactly like it. I did not raise my voice. I became someone else. The person 11 years of work had built. That person called emergency services, gave weight and age and symptoms in a clear voice, began counting respirations against her watch, and while her mouth did the professional things, one sentence beat inside her skull in time with her son's slow breathing. One rule. One rule. One rule. At the hospital they ran to reach him, and I have been part of that machine 1,000 times. Standing outside it is an entirely different country. His blood sugar came back low enough to set off every alarm in the room, which is what alcohol does to a baby's body. It does not simply sedate them. It pulls the fuel from their brain and lets their temperature fall. They placed in 4-line in his scalp because the veins in his arms had clamped shut. Dextrose. Warm blankets in layers. The lab confirmed what my nose already knew. A positive ethanol result in an infant who weighed 18 pounds. The attending physician, a steady woman I had worked beside for years, never raised her voice once, which somehow made everything she said feel heavier than shouting. Near dawn, she found me in the family alcove of my own unit and sat across from me in the chair I had guided 100 other mothers into.
"He is stable," she said.
"At his weight, Sarah, a few more hours or a little more in that bottle, and we are having a very different conversation." I nodded like a colleague. I heard it like a mother. Caleb spent the night in the pediatric intensive care unit 3 doors down from a patient I had been charting on just that afternoon. I sat beside his warmer with my hand through the porthole, one finger against his wrist, feeling his pulse tick against my skin. Before the doctor left, she paused at the door and said the sentence I had delivered gently to hundreds of other parents over the years. "You understand we are required to report this." I said yes. I understood. I had no idea what that actually meant yet. Here is what nobody explains to you about mandatory reporting. The report does not go out with a guilty party's name attached to it. It goes out with an address. And the address was mine. Within 2 days, a caseworker from Children's Services was sitting on my couch with a clipboard, because that is the proper procedure. The child's guardians are assessed first. I would defend that procedure with everything I have, even though living inside it felt like being peeled open. She walked through my house. She photographed the lock on the medicine cabinet. She interviewed Kyle by phone, patched in from a utility yard 200 miles away, his voice controlled and careful. She spoke with Lily gently, with me outside the door, asking whether the grown-ups in the house ever behaved strangely. My daughter said, "Aunt Bethany walks funny sometimes." 6 years old. Then a detective named Harmon came, a quiet, decent man who took my full statement at the kitchen table. I gave him everything I had because of course I had everything. The printed note, with the dosing instructions circled. The text messages. The complete timeline I had started typing in the ambulance out of pure trained reflex, times and observations in block letters. He read through it twice. Then he closed his notebook and looked at me the way people look at you when your habits stop being something to laugh about and start being evidence. He told me Bethany had given her own statement that morning. He told me it was a little different from mine. If you have ever sat in a hospital waiting room because someone you love called danger a family tradition, I need you to hear what comes next. You are not imagining things. You are not alone. Tell me in the comments the one rule you will never allow to be crossed again. I read every single one. And if you are new here, please subscribe because what my family did after the hospital is the reason this story exists. Bethany's version was a work of art. I say that with the particular bitterness of someone who watched the artist practice her whole life. One small drop, she told the detective, rubbed gently on his gums for the teething pain. An old family remedy passed down through the generations. Completely safe in tiny amounts. She seemed surprised that no one was thanking her for staying calm in a difficult situation. The lab results said otherwise. You do not get a positive blood alcohol reading in an 18-pound baby from a drop on the gums. You get it from alcohol stirred into a formula bottle by a hand that had already poured 2 glasses for itself. The detective laid it out plainly, no theater, the way tired people tell the truth. And my mother, standing in that hospital corridor in her good cardigan, listened to every word and found her position.
She did not mean any harm by it, she said.
There is no bad intention in that girl. As if intention were the only ingredient that mattered. As if the formula bottle had checked her motives before absorbing what was in it. I stood there holding my discharge paperwork and watched the family creed assemble itself in real time. No bad intention means no wrongdoing. No wrongdoing means no real harm. No real harm means nothing happened. And nothing happening is what this family does best. I was too exhausted to fight it that day. I took my son home and slept on his floor with 2 monitors running. 2 weeks later, an envelope arrived from the county prosecutor's office. I read it standing at the mailbox. The state of Ohio had moved forward and made a decision that my family was still insisting nobody needed to make. The county charged Bethany with child endangerment, not based on anything I initiated. The state did that on the strength of the medical record and the police file, the way the state is supposed to when a baby is brought to an emergency room with alcohol in his bloodstream. Then I did the small things that do not make for dramatic television. I had the locks changed. I updated Lily's school pickup list with photographs attached. Me, Kyle, one neighbor, and no one else. I printed the bond conditions and put a copy in the diaper bag, next to the dosing card, because paper is how I manage fear. Notice what I did not do, because it matters later. I did not post anything publicly. I did not contact a single relative to argue my position. Bethany's power has always been the performance. I refused to walk onto the stage. For days after that dinner, Bethany changed tactics and came to find me at the one place I still felt safe to be myself. I was 6 hours into a shift when the front desk called back to my unit, and I came around the corner into the pediatric lobby to find my sister at the reception window asking for me by name. Wednesday afternoon, crying the loud kind, and under the fluorescent lights, I could see it on her and smell it from 6 feet away over the hand sanitizer. There were parents in that lobby. Parents of my patients. She saw me, and her volume went up. "You ruined my life," she said. "You are letting them make me a criminal." And then pivoting almost instantly to something softer. "Just talk to them. You can fix this. You fix everything." Security walked her out while she was still calling my name in a voice I still hear sometimes when I am too tired. The charge nurse filed an incident report. Policy. I stood at the nursing station filling out my portion in study block letters. Then I went to the staff restroom, locked the door, and shook for 5 minutes. Then I washed my hands and went back to my patients because that is the entire job. The voicemail started that night. Sweet at 9 in the evening. "I miss you. I miss the kids. Remember when we were little?" Vicious by 1 in the morning. Words I will not repeat here, a slur underneath every syllable. I did not answer any of them. I did not delete any of them either. I let them stack up like evidence, dated and automatic. When I told Renee about the lobby, she was quiet for a moment. Then she asked me how many times something like that had happened. "Because if it is a pattern," she said, "there is a door here you do not know about yet." The second incident answered her question 11 days later. Lily's school lets out at 3:15. A stream of backpacks moving toward the fence line, and my daughter was halfway across the yard when a woman at the fence started calling her name and waving. "Aunt Bethany," saying, "Come here, sweetheart, come talk to me. I want to tell you what your mother is doing to me." A teacher's aide reached Lily before anyone else did, walked her back inside, and the school office called me before I had even clocked out for the day. I drove there with both hands on the wheel like a student, because if I let them go anywhere else they were going to shake. Lily was physically fine. Lily was confused, chewing her sleeve, asking whether Aunt Bethany was in trouble and whether any of this was somehow her own fault. And I sat in the school counselor's office with a feelings chart on the wall and explained to a 6-year-old that none of it was her fault, while privately completing a decision I had been circling for weeks. In Ohio, when the person causing fear is a sibling rather than a spouse, there is a specific legal option called a civil stalking protection order. 2 incidents establish a pattern. I had the hospital documentation and a schoolyard full of witnesses. I filed that week at the county clerk's window with my folder of block letter timelines, and a magistrate granted a temporary order the same afternoon and scheduled a full hearing date. Both parties could bring witnesses, the clerk told me. So could I. That evening I learned from the paperwork that Bethany had exactly one name on her witness list. I read that name 3 times before I could absorb it. My mother was going to testify. And not for me. I called her because some part of me needed to hear it confirmed in her actual voice, the way you press on a bruise to know whether it is real. She did not deny it, and she did not apologize. Her tone was the worst part. Patient and gentle, a teacher explaining rain to a young child. I am not against you, sweetheart. I am going to tell the truth. That girl is not a stalker. She is not dangerous. She misses those children. And somebody in this family has to speak up for Mercy, since everyone else has apparently chosen sides. Chosen sides. I stood in my kitchen listening to my mother describe my son's night in the intensive care unit as a side I had chosen. And something in me stopped trying to reach her permanently. The way a machine stops when you finally unplug it instead of continuing to hit it. Kyle came in from the garage and read everything on my face in about 2 seconds. He took the phone gently from my hand, said very quietly into it, "We will see you at the hearing, Diane," and set it down with the care of someone handling something fragile. Then he held my shoulders and said the thing I had not been able to say out loud myself. "You're not choosing this. They keep choosing it. Every single day they choose it. And they're going to keep choosing it in front of a judge." December came quickly. I pressed my good blazer the same way my mother used to press my father's church shirts before Sunday, which is a comparison I made to myself in the bathroom mirror and did not enjoy making. I walked into that county hearing room carrying a folder of timelines and one question I had been too afraid to hold until there was a courtroom large enough to hold it with me. If it finally comes down to my mother or my children, and it will, what will be left of me after? The weekend before the hearing, I went looking through an old shoebox of photographs I had taken years ago when my mother downsized her house, because my attorney wanted family history and my own memory wanted receipts. I found the dates I was looking for. I also found a photograph I had forgotten existed. Bethany at 17, standing in the hallway of the house we grew up in, her back pressed against our father's bedroom door, arms folded across her chest, chin lifted. A small determined guard in a marching band shirt. I remembered that night exactly. He had been roaring and looking for his truck keys, and my little sister had hidden them inside a flour tin on the shelf. And she stood in front of that door for an hour absorbing everything he shouted at her. Because at 15, 16, 17, that was her assigned role in that house. She was the one who called me at college crying so hard I could not make out individual words, saying please come home. And I had said I had finals. There was one more thing in that box, and I had carried it for years without letting it weigh anything. My mother's voice, some holiday, laughing over dishes. Oh, you girls never slept either. A little whiskey in the bottle always worked like a charm. My mother did that for us too. Bethany did not create that recipe. She was its first patient. She had been absorbing that household's medicine since before she could hold a cup herself. And the same family now weeping for her Mercy was the exact family that had taught her the dose. I sat on the garage floor and cried for 10 minutes for the girl in the marching band shirt. Then I put the lid back on the shoebox, went inside, and printed 4 copies of my timeline. Loving my sister was never the question. Handing her my children was. The hearing room was small and beige and too warm, and somehow that made everything worse. Cruelty sits differently in a room the size of a Sunday school classroom. Bethany sat with her attorney, sober that morning, scrubbed and neat in a collared dress I recognized from a funeral years ago. My mother took the stand in her church cardigan and swore to tell the truth.
She did not lie. Exactly.
She curated. Bethany would not hurt a soul. The hospital visit was a misunderstanding. The school incident was poor judgment, yes, but she misses those children the way you miss a part of yourself. And then, folding her hands, in the same voice, she used to read us bedtime stories. No real harm was done, Your Honor. The baby is fine. The baby is fine. The room went narrow, and I heard my sister's voice come out of my mother's mouth. He is still alive, isn't he? The same belief system in different clothing. My family measuring the worth of my son's life in not yet dead. My turn came, and I did not perform. I read the timeline. Dates, times, the hospital incident report, the aide's written account from the school, the bond conditions already on record. I answered the magistrate's questions in the same voice I used to give shift change reports. The order was granted before noon. 5 years. My attorney called it a clean result, and it was. And I walked out of that clean result into the courthouse hallway completely alone, and my mother walked past me at the elevators the way you walk past a stranger waiting for the same bus. Standing there, I finally understood something, and I want you to have it before the hardest night of this story, because you have earned it by coming this far. When a family tells you to keep the peace, ask them one question. Peace for whom? If you have ever had a mother choose a comfortable lie over your child's safety, I am walking that exact road beside you right now. Drop the words "one rule" in the comments so I know you are out there. And please subscribe because the night I am about to describe is the reason I started telling the story. The criminal case never went to trial. Most of them do not. In February, Bethany accepted a plea agreement. 3 years of supervised community control, mandatory substance abuse treatment, a no-contact order covering Caleb and our home written directly into the sentence itself. No jail time. And I want to be honest that I was not sorry about that outcome. I stood in that courtroom and read my statement and asked the judge for one specific thing. That every protective condition remain exactly as written. Then I sat down. I was not asking anyone to bury my sister. I was asking them to keep a particular door locked. That night my mother called, and there were no tears this time. Her voice had something cold in it. She has a permanent record now, she said. Are you satisfied? I said nothing, which she took as permission to continue. Here is what is going to happen. You're going to withdraw that 5-year order. You're going to let her come to Easter. This family is going to heal. And here her voice did not rise. It settled. You can stop calling me your mother. 40 years of loving that woman came and stood in the room with me. Then I looked down the hallway where Caleb's nightlight glowed soft and steady under his door. The door of a boy who was upstairs breathing easily because of a document with a judge's signature on it. Then I said, "Then I suppose I will miss you. That is all." And I hung up first, which I had never done once in my life. In my family, forgiveness had always been a faster word for forgetting. And I was finished forgetting. That was February, and my mother has not called since. People imagine estrangement as a battle. Mostly it is logistics. Thanksgiving for 4 instead of 14, and Kyle frying a turkey larger than necessary on purpose. Christmas morning wrapped in paper and noise, and a package I mailed to my mother returned unopened in January with refused written in her handwriting on the front. Lily asking me why Grandma sent her gift back, and me finding a sentence a 7-year-old could hold on to. Caleb learning to say ball and dog, and no with tremendous commitment. I found a Thursday evening group in a church basement 1 town over, folding chairs and burnt coffee, and other mothers and sisters and daughters of people exactly like my people. The first night, a retired schoolteacher took my hand and said, "Honey, you can love someone with everything you have and still lock the door." And I cried in front of complete strangers like it was something I had been training for. Saturday morning had the nerve to be ordinary. Pancakes because I had promised. Caleb in his high chair conducting something invisible with a spoon, syrup in Lily's hair. Morning light on the table where the dosing card and the pickup list live under a strawberry-shaped magnet. Monday morning Renee called, and there was something in her voice I had not heard from anyone in a long time. Something close to good news. Because of the active warrant and the direct violation, the court was presenting Bethany with a choice. Jail time or a bed in a 90-day residential treatment program. Locked facility. Licensed. Medical detox. The kind, Renee said carefully, that you cannot charm your way out of by the following Tuesday. She took the bed. She is getting on the van this afternoon, Renee told me. I hung up and stood at my kitchen window with my coffee going cold, watching Lily run the sprinkler for her brother. And I finally said the true thing to myself in my own head, in my own voice. All those years, I believed I was saving her. I was not. I was catching her over and over, which meant she never once hit bottom. Which meant she never once had the chance to stand up. Locking that door was the first genuinely honest thing I had ever done for my sister. It took 35 years, and it cost me my mother, and I would do it again before breakfast. 6 weeks have passed since that night on the porch, and I want to end this the way I would chart it. Just the facts and what they cost. Bethany is in a residential facility, 40 days in as I record this. Last week, an envelope arrived. My name in her handwriting, careful the way you write when you have drafted it several times first. Inside was a letter I recognized the shape of immediately. The program builds it into the process. The amends letter. The one where you name what you did without asking for anything back. She named it. The bottle. The gums. The wine at dinner. The hospital lobby. The fence at Lily's school. All of it in plain sentences with no attorney in them and no mother in them either. She wrote, I keep thinking about how you used to label everything in your house, and how I used to think that was funny, and how the whole time I was the thing in that house that needed a label warning people to be careful. And at the bottom, under her name, a postscript that undid me completely at my own kitchen table. You were the only one who ever told me the truth. Taped to the paper, a small plastic chip. 30 days counted from her detox date. Cheap red plastic. Lighter than a coin. I have not written back. Hear me on this because it is the part that greeting cards will always get wrong. I will not be writing back this year. And that is not cruelty. That is the lesson this whole story bled to teach me. The letter went into the kitchen drawer alongside the dosing card and the protection order. And yes, I labeled the folder. Bethany, Year 1. If the chips keep arriving. If the years stack up. If the change outlives the apology by a distance you can measure with time rather than words, there will be a Year 2 folder. And perhaps someday a dinner at a table I set under a rule that will never again be negotiable. Trust is not something I give as a gift in this family anymore. It is a payment plan with a very long term. My mother and I have exchanged exactly one communication since. In September, she sent a text with no punctuation and no name signed. How is the baby? I looked at it for a long time. Then I sent back a photograph. Caleb on the back porch in the late afternoon light, mid-laugh, both fists full of Kyle's tomato plants. She did not reply. The house with the needlework blessing continues to believe what it needs to believe. And I've stopped sending invoices for other people's stories. Some doors you hold open. Some you close gently. Some you simply stop standing in front of. Last night, Caleb let go of the couch and took his first real steps. 4 of them, right down the front hallway, across the exact floorboards where I once counted his breaths against my watch. And he pressed both palms flat against the front door and laughed like a squeaky hinge being oiled for the first time. And I sat down on those oak floors for the 3rd time in this story. And this time it was only to clap. She is still breathing, my sister, somewhere upstate under a counselor's watch. He is still breathing, my son, loud and present with syrup on his chin. It turns out those 2 sentences were never the same thing at all. Real forgiveness has a memory. I used to believe that loving someone meant never letting go. Now I know that sometimes the most loving thing you will ever do is lock the door, make the call, and let the person you love finally meet the one thing you kept rescuing them from. Which was never the fall itself, but the truth waiting at the bottom of it. That is my story. 1 rule. 1 glass of wine. And one night I answered the camera instead of the door. If someone in your life keeps testing your 1 rule, take this as your sign to stop negotiating it. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors with locks that only you hold. If this story reached you at the right moment, share it with someone who needs it. Drop a comment and subscribe. Thank you for being here. I will see you in the next one. Hello, Clued. I have already shared my story above. Based on this story, I need a complete YouTube SEO package targeting a USA audience. Please provide everything in English. Asterisk a highly clickable, SEO-optimized YouTube title. Asterisk a professional SEO description. Asterisk SEO tags. Asterisk relevant hashtags. I also need thumbnail text. I will share my competitor's thumbnail. Please analyze it carefully and create thumbnail text in the same style, structure, and number of li.